Good morning. I hope this is on. So I am Damon Siles, the former mayor of Scarborough. Glad to introduce a former mayor of Emeryville, although he's still in the weeds with this stuff, so you get to hear all about that this morning. I appreciate the organizers for giving me this honor and privilege really to introduce John. It can be a little humbling to show a visitor your town. And especially when that visitor is someone whose journey you've been following and cheering on and talking with your friends about for several years. And humbling in this community, Scarborough and Chapel Hill, where we have the highest transit mode share in the state. We have among the highest, if not the highest, pedestrian and bicycle mode shares in the state. But we still have so much work to do. And you see that when you're showing a visitor around. It's right there in front of us if we just stop and look. I met up with John yesterday at the home of Scarborough's very own Heidi Perry, who many of you know. She's on your board. Heidi lives in a neighborhood just outside of downtown Scarborough, which to a visitor from Emeryville probably seemed quite suburban. Emeryville, I think, has about 14,000 residents and about 1 square mile. So a little bit different than what we're used to here. John and I rode around town a little so I could show him Town Hall and the Town Commons, where the farmers market is. Showed him Weaver Street Lawn and the new bike improvements that are coming up on Jones Ferry Road. After breakfast, we walked through downtown to see the Libby-Cotton Bikeway and the new Civic building that's coming up, and the Main Street Road Diet, which just got finished a couple years ago, and also a lot of surface parking. We took a look at that too. When you talk with John and when you hear from the speakers we've already heard from this morning, you quickly realize the challenges in all our communities are essentially the same challenges. And you're reminded that creating pedestrian-friendly and bicycle-friendly communities is not a standalone issue. It's one important part of a broader creating of welcoming communities. That means expanding housing options, making transit more accessible to more people, and taking public safety and public health and climate action seriously. So much of our success in advancing that agenda depends on how we communicate with our neighbors and our policymakers, which John will be talking about with you today. And that's the work that John's doing as a council member and former mayor of Emeryville, California, and as America's bike mayor. And John flew across the country to be here today. He's taking time off from a very busy campaign for the Alameda County Board of Supervisors. Alameda County is, I believe, the biggest county in the Bay Area. 2 million people. He is working 20-hour days every day and campaigning with a $1 million campaign budget, which he had to raise himself. So for all of those reasons, I hope you'll join me in giving a big welcome to John Bauters.
Well, good morning. How are you? All right, good. I hope you got your little caffeine refresh. My name's John Bauters. I'm a council member in the city of Emeryville, California. We like to call ourselves small but mighty. Emeryville, California, by way of brief introduction, that is actually outdated. We have surpassed 13,000 people. When I got elected 8 years ago, we were just about 10,000 people. And by 2035, we'll be about 30,000 people. That's how fast we're growing our little 1 square mile. As people out here, we talked about sprawl. We sprawl up. So we build up in Emeryville. Emeryville, I could give you a whole history lecture, but I'll just advise you to go online and find the YouTube about that. I go to a local bar and I do something called Nerd Night, and I tell everybody about Emeryville as the original city of vice on the West Coast, and get all your salacious stories about West Coast politics in the 18 and 1900s there. But today my goal is to talk to you about communication. Probably fundamentally, the most important thing we do as advocates, as professionals, as elected officials, is communicate effectively. And there are some tips that I'd like to leave you with today. The goal of this presentation is for you to walk away having acquired either a skill, a perspective, or a new way of thinking about how to communicate what it is you do and the work you do to the audience you communicate with, or audiences, effectively, with the shared goal of active transportation. So we're going to have a couple pieces to this presentation that may be different than what you're used to, and I'm going to ask you to indulge me when I give you an instruction to do that thing. Sound good? All right. So let's get started with Some super important data. North Carolina road safety data is going to be the very first thing I want to share with all of you because it should be the thing that's most familiar to some of you. Okay, so I got this information from a report that came out earlier this spring here in your own state through the North Carolina Department of Transportation, and it's focusing on outcomes related to the Vision Zero goals of the state of North Carolina. So in 2021, you had the highest number of road deaths ever here. 1,755 people died on the roads of North Carolina in 2021. That figure was 5% higher than the previous record, which was set a number of years ago in 2007, right? So the trajectory is not all that great. Traffic fatalities are the leading cause of death for all people between the ages of 1 and 34 across the United States, and that largely includes North Carolina as well. NCDOT acquired $2.5 million for funding safety projects in the last 12 months. Okay, good. Could probably be more, I think most of us would say. Raleigh received $1 million in a Safe Streets for All grant application in the springtime this year. There were 50,000 total crashes in the 2022 report. 59 people were killed in Raleigh in 53 separate fatal crashes in 2022. And one of those was a cyclist, and 23 of those were pedestrians. Okay, you got that? Great. All right, storytelling. Raise your hand if you know who this girl is. Not a single hand. I want that to be reflected in the video. Okay, not a single person know who this is. This is a girl named Lily Shambrook. She is 3 years old in this photograph. It is one of the last photographs that was ever taken of Lily Shambrook. On June 9th, 2022, Lily Shambrook left her home with her mother and father, and she was riding on the back of her mother's bicycle in Chicago, Illinois, on the north side where she lives. And Lily's family went out to the park that day. It was a beautiful summer afternoon. And on the way home, they used a very popular east-west bike connector route across the north side of Chicago called Leland Avenue. And it's popular because it's broken up with city parks and some areas where the road is closed to vehicles. So bicyclists from the north side of the city going west like to access the lakeshore using that. And there are bike lanes painted on the streets of Leland Avenue. Lily was riding in the back seat of the bike that I told you about with her mother, Kate, and as they approached the intersection in front of the Christopher House Preschool, there was a Commonwealth Edison truck parked in the bike lane. That Commonwealth Edison truck was completely obstructing the ability to leave that bike lane and also access the intersection. So Kate had to navigate the bike with Lily out into the one lane of traffic headed in the same direction. Well, that street was being used and blocked in many places, so that street was being used by a number of cyclists that day. And an 18-wheeler that uses Leland Avenue because it's one of the only streets that has a clearance under the Chicago Transit Authority's red line was tired of driving behind all the cyclists. So he was plowing through up to the stop sign. And he wedged Kate and Lily between the ComEd truck and his own 18-wheeler. And the side of that truck hit her handlebar, and the bicycle fell to the ground, and the back of the vehicle her bike went under the back two tires of an 18-wheeler, and Lily was dragged 30 feet to her death under an 18-wheeler in front of a preschool. Okay. Her dad attends bike events around the city of Chicago regularly, critical mass events, bike awareness events, safety events. His name's Tim. Okay. Tim had this very picture, one of the last pictures of Lily that was ever taken, turned into a sticker. It glitters. And he passes it out at bike events as part of his own self-care. Okay. I have been to Chicago and been on many rides. I've been on a ride hosted by Tim where we actually go to the intersection where Lily was killed, and he talks about his fight with the city of Chicago and Commonwealth Edison to put in fully separated and protected bike lanes to prevent further deaths and injuries to people like his own daughter. His sticker of Lily is in the inside of the cargo basket of my bike. Okay, now is the time to take our quiz. If you took notes, close your notebook. If you put anything on your laptop, shut your laptop. It's part of the exercise, folks. How many fatalities were there in 2021? 1,755. What percentage higher was it than the year before? And how many people were recorded Or, I'm sorry, in what year? Sorry about that. Okay. Ages 1 to what? You guys are too good. How much money? Okay, I'm going to hire all of you. What was the answer to this? Okay, fewer people, but it's springtime. Total crashes. 50,000. How many were killed in Raleigh and how many crashes? 59 and 53. How many were pedestrians? 23. Okay. What is her name? Okay. Where does she live? How old is she? What was she doing on June 9th, 2022? Back of a bike. Who's driving the bike? Kate. Thank you. Where were they doing that? What street? Leland Avenue. What was in the bike lane? ComEd truck. I know, like everyone knew ComEd. And she was killed by a tractor trailer. But what does her dad produce and give out to people at events? And where's mine located? Okay. You guys did better than most people do, but let's talk for a moment about that. I'm not going to lie, you did a good job. I debated putting the quiz at the very end of the presentation, but I was like, no, I think we should actually test it. So data is really important, right? But data doesn't tell the whole story, and it doesn't impact you the same way. You have a slide full of data, and you guys recalled it really well, actually, and that's a testament to your paying attention. I appreciate that. I've done this before when most people can't remember the statistics of their own state or their own town. They don't know them. But they will remember everything about a story that is told to them that impacts the way they feel. And when you have an elected official or a government agent who's got maybe 5 minutes of time and they have 1,000 other things on their agenda that day, they're not all going to recall a presentation that's really chock full of data. It isn't going to hit them the same way. I still have conversations with people from 10 years ago who say, I remember this story about so-and-so. How you communicate and what you tell about the people you are using to illustrate the work that we're doing really impacts and leaves a lasting impression on the way people feel. It changes their perspective of things. They will forget that data tomorrow or in the next week or in the next month. Maybe you won't. But they will, right? But they will remember Lily. They will remember how you're telling that story made them feel. They will remember the significance of her life and the implication of what policy changes could be made to improve and prevent what happened to her. So that brings me to kind of the next thing I want to talk about, which is the narratives we use. Safety, safety, safety. And I don't know why this always does that. There's the other one. Safety, safety, safety. So there's a lot of people in the United States, if you ask people today, how many people believe that we have a climate action emergency, that there's a real climate danger? A vast majority of Americans now believe that there is a significant climate action crisis. Similar number of people actually believe humans are the cause for it. A lot of people think that the US government should do something about it. In fact, most of them actually, 90% of people think that they say, I would support the US government planting 1 trillion trees to address the climate crisis. 84% of people, according to Pew Research, will actually tell you, I think the government should give tax breaks to businesses that find ways to capture carbon. But if you ask people, how many of them would be willing to give up driving for 1 mile or less trips? It is under 20%. People don't feel personally responsible and connected to climate action and active travel as being related. But a lot of what we talk about when we go out and do advocacy or talk to our communities is we bring up these very legitimate and true facts about other things: economic opportunity, climate action, the cost of maintaining roads for cars and trucks versus the cost of maintaining streets and sidewalks for pedestrians and bicyclists. These are all factual things. The question is, are they the persuasive things? Are they the narratives that actually work? There is one narrative that beats all these narratives that we do use, but not enough. And in fact, it's the only narrative I use. Safety. Safety, 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 safety. Every single project, we have done in the city of Emeryville is narrated through the lens of safety. It is primal to our existence. It is critically imperative to how we perceive our surroundings, what we will do or not do in a given day, what risks we take. Everything we do is through a lens of safety. And so communicating through a narrative of safety and a message of safety will relate better to whatever audience you work with than one for which people may cognitively agree, but not personally identify with or feel compelled to be part of the same way they do participating in a system that is safe. So by using storytelling as an example, I want to talk about this. These 4 pictures are pictures of new projects in the last 3 years in my city that opened. Okay, on the top left, you have the East Bay German International School, and that was right after right when we were finishing a project where we turned the street into 1-car lane. We removed all the street parking, and we put in a double directional bicycle track. Bottom left corner is you can see it kind of in the shadow off the side. We removed all the parking down Steve Dane Drive to our high school. The high school is behind us in the image to connect the schools. We did a program that year where we took all of our street paving funding and we put in the full bike plan, implemented the active travel plan adjacent and around all of our schools. We created a new program. We used to do street paving was an agenda item in the capital investment plan. Separate from that was the active travel plan, and we merged them into something we call sustainable streetscapes. The idea being that we shouldn't rip up the road twice. Let's just do it all at one time. So now when we do our repaving program, we actually fully implement the active travel plans. And so in 2022, when we launched it, we decided that the first thing we were going to do was all the areas proximate to our schools and city and civic buildings, similar to what Barca said, why you lead by showing that we'll do this first. Okay, up on the top right, I'll come back to that story. That's Doyle Street, and that's a separate project I'll share. And the bottom right is our new South Bayfront Bridge, which spans 8 lanes of Union Pacific Railroad, the busiest stretch of railroad in Northern California, and it connects both sides of our city with a car-free pathway for people on active travel. And we did these projects, and we moved very quickly to do them. And I began getting communications, we'll call them, from people. So I'm going to tell you about the one on the top left for this example. The top left, we have the double directional cycle track that goes around the school, and we put in protected intersections at all the blocks, within 2 blocks of all these schools. I get an email. Dear Mayor Bauters, what on earth are you thinking? As I came down Adeline Street today, I had to come to a near complete stop to make a right turn onto 41st Street. I was on my way to drop my kid off at school, and there is a large concrete island in the intersection. Do you even have a licensed civil engineer on the staff at the city of Emeryville? Did you ask the community for permission to do this? Did you consult with all the parents about this weird thing that you've installed in the intersection that makes it really hard? And by the way, I now have to go into the parking lot and queue in the parking lot behind the school to drop off and pick up my child. And I looked at this, and you have this big bike path in front of the school, and I only counted 12 bikes. What are you thinking? Signed, angry/concerned parent. Dear parent. I love communication. Dear parent, thank you so much for noticing our Safe Routes to Schools program. You've encountered something called a protected intersection. I'm so happy it works. It's designed to slow people like you down at areas where there is a high need for caution and care around sensitive and vulnerable populations. Did you know that in Alameda County, 66% of children who are hit or injured by a vehicle are hit or injured within 2 blocks of their school? I did this project in partnership with our city staff, and yes, a licensed civil engineer did design it, to protect your child and all of their classmates to keep them safe. I think every child in Emeryville should go to school safely. I think they should come home alive. And that dual directional path you have there creates visibility, a sense of space and protection for children who don't have to navigate in and out of parents darting to catch their kid fastest and make it back onto the state highway. I was like, I hope you'll appreciate that I did this for the safety of our children, because I don't ever want to be the mayor who installs a teddy bear memorial outside a school to remind all of their little classmates that their neighborhood is dangerous. Sincerely, Mayor Bauters. I never get responses to my emails. You want tips on how to end the conversation and really win? You write an email that is completely about safety. Okay? I also have a habit of blind copying all my staff because I wanted them to know I did it. But what I learned is they have created a Google Doc and they cut and paste all my emails, and they use them now. They communicate safety the way I communicate safety. I got called by the principal of that school. There's no people in the pictures of the schools because this is in the summer we finished this. I got called a couple months later by the principal of the school. Mr. Bauters, would you please come to school? It has been a long time since the principal called me to the office. That happened quite a bit as a child. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna have some crusty old principal tell me that she hates this thing and says, I'm tired of hearing about all the parents. And I show up at the school, she walks out, shakes my hand, says, it is so nice to meet you. I was like, it was nice to meet you too, ma'am. She's like, I'd like to take you inside the school and show you something. She opens the front doors of that school. The hallway, both sides of the hallway, is lined with bicycles. She said, we love this new bike program. She goes, all these parents are now taking their kids to school on bike. They bike with them. She goes, do you think you could build some bike racks? Culture change, the mindset change, the framing change, not giving into the narratives about who built it, did you have the right process, is this done by someone who has a proper license, is it about climate action, is it about giving away parking spaces to kids? No, it's just about safety. It's just about safety. That is the winning narrative, always, always is safety. And all these projects have a story about safety. But we are not going to tell all those stories today because we need to talk about your facts and your feelings. This is a really important place where a lot of advocates, our blood boils when we see some, often we'll call them a NIMBY person maybe, who really loves parking and really hates biking and really doesn't like bike lanes taking parking. Coming and talking to you or talking to decision makers in the same forum you're at about how terrible a project will be for the community, the cost of the project, the need of the project, the livability of the project, the economic factors that will be impacted by the project, right? And we have a tendency to respond, but we often don't think about how we're responding and whether we're responding in the same communication style, because we don't often take the first step of saying, am I listening to a fact or a feeling? So I practice something called active listening. How many know what active listening is? Good. Oh, good. That makes it a lot easier. So number one, you're paying attention. You're present. Your body language says, I'm here listening to you. I sit at the dais when I have town halls or city council meetings and I listen, I make eye contact with people. I'm present. You matter, right? Second is that you reflect an understanding of what the person is saying. Show them that you're listening. Nodding your head is a nonverbal cue. Saying, I agree. Saying, I understand, following their conversation, right? Validates that the person is being heard. Third is basically asking small questions to better understand, to show that you want to understand a person, right? So, can you clarify? Or did you mean? Right? Those are things that we can say and do that provide feedback that tell a person we understand them. Fourth, the subtle one is deferring all your judgment. So, not being so anxious to speak that we're interrupting other people. You can often see people start to want to talk while you're talking. They're not listening. They're thinking about what to say back. That's the first cue that someone is not listening to you. So really managing and mastering the practice of sitting in presence and just listening. And even if in your head you're like, this is so crazy, I'm just going to nod along because I'm listening to you. It's really important to getting to the outcome we're going to talk about on facts versus feelings. And then at the very end, the most important thing is appropriate response, which requires being open, honest, candid, and unapologetic about where you stand in relation to what you've heard. Bottom left is a project that we're currently working on. It's about, I don't even remember, 14 miles, I think. It's San Pablo Avenue corridor, State Route 123. It goes from the center of downtown Oakland out through the north part of Alameda County, touches Oakland, Emeryville, Berkeley, and Albany. It's a straight shot highway. It's currently 4 travel lanes, a turn lane in the middle, and parking lanes on both sides, about an 80-foot wide right-of-way. It's a car sewer, okay? Pumps cars in and out of downtown Oakland all day, and it has no amenities for active travel almost at all. And is one of the highest commuted corridors and the most direct routes for people. Hundreds of thousands of people live on that green and red space up there, okay? And for 8 years, I have been the chair of a committee that is overseeing the total transformation of this corridor into a full, complete street with bus rapid transit lanes on the outside, no parking, with completely curb-separated bike lanes, pedestrian bulb outs, and changes into the way the entire system operates, okay? Hundreds of millions of dollars to do this project. We've been very competitive. So I've had to do a number of meetings with rooms about this size, with this many people in it, chairing public listening sessions from community members. That can be challenging, right? You've been to those meetings. You understand who shows up, right? The person who has all the time on their hands, not the busy mom or dad who has work or has to pick up a kid from school, the person who just kind of wants to get out of the house for the afternoon, has nothing else to do. So they show up. And on the San Pablo Avenue corridor project, give a great example of how you use active listening and understanding facts versus feelings. Because when people talk to us with their feelings, if we respond to them with facts, we're what people would call a condescending a-hole. I just yelled at you very respectfully about how angry I am about your crazy bike project. And you told me about kids dying and statistics of injuries. I didn't want to hear that. That doesn't matter to me. I'm going to talk right over that because I'm not using facts. I am talking with my feelings. So when people talk to us with their feelings, you have to talk with your feelings. So how do I do this? How do I model that, right? So a community member, a woman, came to one of the meetings and said, I really hate this project, okay? That is a feeling. This project is not necessary. Nobody bikes on San Pablo Avenue. It's completely ridiculous to think that we should spend hundreds of millions of dollars, disrupt everybody's lives, and do this because you think some people will bike on San Pablo Avenue. It's 45 miles an hour. Cars are speeding down that road all the time. No one is going to bike on San Pablo Avenue, and nobody does today. They don't want to use it. And I go to Emeryville, to your town mayor, to get my nails done, which, thank you. But I go get my nails done in Emeryville. It's already hard enough to find parking on San Pablo Avenue in front of that little small business. And now you're gonna make me have to find another place to park my car because you're gonna get rid of all the parking? I just won't shop in your town anymore. I won't. No, not me. I will go get my nails done somewhere else. And you're gonna kill all your local businesses. You're gonna kill them because they're gonna lose customers like me because there's no place to park, and soon enough, they'll all dry up and they'll be gone. And this road will be just an empty, blighted corridor that had a lot of good businesses on it that you killed all because nobody wants to bike on that road, but you needed bike lanes. So my response, I listened the entire time. I said, so, ma'am, let me hear if I understood you correctly. You feel this project is not necessary? She nods, okay. You feel that this project would create a great deal of inconvenience to customers and visitors of our community because of parking and other disruptions? She says yes. You feel that this would be economically destructive to my town? Yes. Ma'am, have I summarized correctly how you feel? Yes. Okay. Thank you for sharing your feelings with me. Is it okay if I share my feelings with you? I feel moms and dads who choose for economic, social, health, or personal reasons to choose to commute by a bicycle should be able to go to work and come home alive. I feel that children like me, who at 5 years old was sent to my first day of kindergarten on a bicycle by my parents, gain really important skills, learn about their community, discover independence, and become very, very strong members of our community when they have safe places to move about their community themselves. I feel that there's a lot of customers who probably don't get to go to the nail salon you do because for their transportation needs, it's currently inaccessible. I feel that there's a lot of businesses in the community that have already got these types of bike lanes in front of them who are thriving, and I don't think this would be an exception if we did it here. I have a decision to make as the elected official, and I have to consider how you feel and how others feel. And at the end of the day, I have to make value judgments. And safety is the most important value I have. It's something I want for you and I want for every other member of our community. I feel that I can provide safety for everybody by doing this project. And I feel that once we have safety for everybody, we can then move on to whether or not all of the things that could make it more convenient can then be addressed. And that's the end of the conversation. We don't have to get to agreement. We do have to listen. We do have to speak in a way that eliminates the opportunities for people to walk out of that room and say, he's just a dick. Seriously, he's just a dick. Because when I told him how upset I was, he gave me some BS facts about data in Alameda County. She can't. She has to grapple with the fact that I have feelings too. That's a really important lesson for us to all take and learn. And it's really hard sometimes to discern whether someone is speaking on a given point with a fact or a feeling. There are a lot of cues which we won't go over today. Words like always and never and nobody and everybody, right? Those are pretty clear signs that's probably not usually a fact. Right? I, on behalf of all the people not standing behind me, speak for them, right? But it's really important to learn. And similarly, when we are presented with facts, right, we need to respond with facts. When people misinform the conversation and say, you know, nobody died on San Pablo last year, knowing our facts is good. Actually, 13 people died on San Pablo last year. That is a fact to a fact conversation, right? So it is important to listen actively, to listen to, is the comment being made here, or is that a fact or a feeling? And then to respond appropriately so that the conversation is at a level bar, right? Because at the end of the day, not everybody is going to agree, and we don't have to accept agreement. We have to accept that the conversation is fair. And a lot of times I have that person come to the microphone, and then you see 7 or 8 people in line go sit down after I've spoken. Because they're like, I ain't doing that. He already said what he's going to say to me now, so now I ain't doing that, right? And that's why it's really important to actively listen. But when we talk about listening, right, and facts, sometimes it's really hard because it's like we want to move something in the right direction, but we don't have the facts. I'm all about getting my facts. So the project in the top right, which was on a prior slide as well, is the Doyle Street project. And CalBike rated Emeryville's quick build project on Doyle Street the single best project a couple years ago in the state of California. I'm very proud of that. And at the beginning of COVID, we undertook a kind of special project, and this goes to how do you do facts and how do you get facts, right? When you don't have anything to base it off of, how do you have a conversation with people? It's just kind of all of our feelings. There's no facts. So we have a greenway through our city. About the northern third of the city, it's all former rail trail. In the southern third of the city, it's all former rail to trail. In the middle third of the city is Doyle Street, and it's a north-south street, and on both sides of it are Hollis Street and San Pablo Avenue. Car sewers, right? Traffic lights, whatever. Doyle Street is a very cute, like neighborhood, like mixed business and residential stop sign street. But it had a big problem. cars would speed through it and go through the stop signs to pass all the lights they didn't want to wait on the car-designated streets. And it went past parks and playgrounds and a YMCA and a school. It was really dangerous. 2,500 car trips on a 6-block stretch of Doyle Street a day in a 1 square mile city just to bypass 5 or 6 lights on either side of it, right? So we had already had a vision for ourselves that we were going to completely make that greenway what we wanted it to be, safety. And our opportunity came with COVID. And as soon as we were told by the California health directors that we all needed to stay inside and socially distance and whatever, I called a special meeting of the Transportation Committee, which I chair. I was like, oh, we're doing Doyle Street. There's nobody on the road. We're going to go out and we're going to take the northern block and the southern block. We're going to close them completely to traffic, completely closed. And then the blocks in between, we're going to remove the southbound travel lane and the southbound parking, and we're going to turn it into socially distanced active travel space for the people who all need to walk through the 6-foot bubble, right? And we're going to make that a space in the city for people to use who are having to stay at home. And so what did we do? We went door to door, masks on, phone calls if they preferred it, and we talked to every resident. And residents, some of them on that street said, I park my car out here, Mayor. I was like, yeah, you can park right around the corner on 62nd. There's a space. But I like parking there. Yeah, but COVID. Health directors tell me to make space. I'm just, okay, well, what are you going to do? Let me talk about what we're going to do. And how do you know it's going to work? We don't know. I just want to do it for 6 months till this health order lifts. We're just going to do it. We need everyone to lean in. Really need you to lean in with me. I think I only got down to one resident who was just like, right? Everybody else was like, okay, Mayor, if that's what you need us to do, I accept that you're going to make these changes. We put up temporary K-rail, whatever. And then I was like, go count. So I told staff, go count. And the number of people who used it was off the charts. Off the charts. So within the first 90 days, I was like, go apply for a grant. Build it. And before the first year of COVID, from the first day of COVID, a year had passed, this entire project was permanent and built. Closed streets. We went down to 150 car trips a day from over 2,000. And within the first 90 days, all the people who were kind of worried about losing their parking were like, I like it, it's quiet. I made the facts. I created the facts. And then you didn't stop there. I took those facts to every other neighborhood in my city and was like, look what happened. It got quiet. People love it. You want to talk to Bob? Bob loves it. Seriously. So when you have the facts and feelings conversation, you have to both actively listen, you have to engage people where they're at, and when you don't have the facts, you find innovative ways, like we heard our friends from New Jersey say, we popped up, we did a quick build. You go do those things and you generate the facts. Because we all know, you are all smart people, we know what our communities look like when we add these amenities, when we change the way transportation works. There's a lot of people who've never used the system, who have blinders, they don't understand it, right? They don't realize how much they love it. Every time we open a new part of a greenway in town, I get people who stop me with my cargo bike with my dog, and they go, where did you get that bike? Because everybody on this bike path has one of these. And I think they're cool. I'm like, oh, let me take you over to the Biketopia shop, Like, changing people's hearts and minds can be either a facts or feelings experience, but it depends on how you approach other people. So turning vision into action. Again, I don't know how PowerPoints work. So this is another example of how do we change, and this is something I think I learned yesterday here in North Carolina in particular that I want to impart on you. So in the top, you're seeing the middle segment of a 1,700-foot long 1931 paint factory building, okay? And we're standing by orientation. We're facing a T intersection. It's a T intersection. The building is all the way down this side of the street. And our 45th Street bike route basically dead ends right there in the front of that building. And on the back of it, we were in the process of approving a 10.5-acre site for 500 new homes, a 2-acre city park, a playground, a community organic garden, a whole bunch of other amenities, right? And before I was on the city council, and one of the reasons I may have been elected to the city council, I chaired a neighborhood group called the Park Avenue Resident Committee. What probably sounds like a scary NIMBY term to a lot of people sitting out there, but ours was very much not that. Ours was one that sat down with the community leaders in the development community and said, we would really like you to put a hole through this 1931 paint factory building that never contemplated it, and we'd like the bike path to go straight through it to the park. They're like, you can't do that. Sound familiar? You don't have authority for that. We can't do that. We can't change our speed limits. We can't pave the road differently. We can't add a bike lane there because the state owns all the county roads. I learned all this about your state yesterday. Okay? Sounds great. Active listening, sarcasm. And I just want to share with you, don't accept we can't. There is always a way to do something. It may be a heavier lift, it may require a larger coalition, it may take more time and work. But if we just accept what people tell us we can't do, we will never have nice things. We will never have them. Because the status quo is not nice. The status quo is what we were given, right? I was given a paint factory that predates like my grandparents pretty much. I was told you can't. But instead, we worked with the development community. We got the city to take its development bonus point system and its community benefits requirement for that project, and we made a deal where they would spend $1.5 million seismically upgrading this part of the building and turning it into a bike path, which you can see on the right is like a little bit like the Reich Museum. You can bike straight through a paint factory building that's now a lab building, walk through it into a city park. It invites people. We have people who come on trains from LA and Portland and Seattle just to go through it. We've created a destination out of it. That park is full of people on the weekends. It used to be an abandoned paint factory, right? We can't do that. You can't do that. Many, many times in my career have I been told that, and it just means maybe I can't do it through you or with you or under the rules you are using. But rules can be changed. There are other decision makers, right? And I just want you to know that if you accept the communication of you can't or we can't, you can't. And if you refuse to accept that and have a mindset of you can actually have the community you want. This is a place where I'll just make one other note, which is the importance of understanding loud people who say you can't or you can. The way I train younger people who want to run in politics or people who get elected, I do a lot of mentoring with young people. I say there's three types of people largely. About 15% of the population is very, very vocal, and no matter what you do, they will not like you. I could run into a burning building today, pull out 5 children, they'd be like, he's a jerk. Straight up. There's the people who I could be like, let the building burn, and they'd be like, he's a nice guy. 15% of people on both ends of the spectrum who tend to be much louder than everyone else either will love you no matter what happens or they hate you no matter what happens. 70% of people are everyday people who go about their life, taking care of their families, going to work, caring for their children, aren't buried in the weeds on what we do, who just want to know, is a reasonable decision being made? Has it been thought about? Was there a discussion? Was input received? When I talk to the community, I'm not worried about these 15% of people who are coming to the microphone to just scream at me about how bad I am. And I also don't really worry about the 15% of people who are deeply in love with whatever I'm doing and think I'm the greatest thing. I'm spending most of my time speaking, whether they're present or not. I practice speaking to the 70% of open-minded, reasonable people who just want to know that I'm thoughtful, that I listen to everybody fairly, and I can reach a decision based on a balance of factors. Because at the end of the day, there's a very silent, large group of people in our community who are the people who go out and ride a bike after they are given the safe infrastructure to do it. They'll never come to a meeting to tell you they want it because they don't know that they need it. But when you've provided it to them, they're like, this is cool. This was a good idea. I'm glad they did that. I have had the benefit and the privilege of 7 or 8 years now of meeting those people who made changes in their own life because of that. And it was because I didn't get bogged down in trying to address the concerns of the 15% of people who were trying to distract me from everything I'm trying to do, or be totally in the love fest with the 15% of people who think I can do no wrong. And that same thing happens in the advocacy community. You're gonna have decision makers who think you're terrible, who say, you know, she's just trying to take over the city, she has too much power. Okay, great, that's fine. Oh, she's the best thing in the world, she should be president. Okay, great, that's fine. Then there's all the other council members and bureaucrats who are sitting there who are just like, I wanna understand how she reached that decision. I wanna see why. I wanna take my own time to figure that out. So when we communicate to people, we also need to be really mindful of where people come from and not accepting no. And then my last slide is celebrating. This is so important. So up here I have an example. I'm kind of a guy on Twitter, I was. And I was sitting at a bus stop one day, and across the street is that man. I took that photo. He's leaning on one of our city trash cans, and he's got a cane, he has a bag on the ground, he has a wrap on his foot, okay? I remember sitting on the bus stop and just thinking, why doesn't he sit down? That looks like a very uncomfortable thing. If I was a man in that condition, I would not want to be leaning on a city trash can up against the curb. And then I was like, where is the bus seat? So I got on the bus, going the opposite direction of that man, and I just looked at the other side of 40th Street. Every bus stop on 40th Street, on the other side of the street, has no bench. And I thought, how have I never noticed that? I ride the bus all the time, I'm car free. How have I never noticed that? Maybe it's because I'm an able-bodied person. Maybe it's because I show up at the bus as it's about to pull away most of the time. I went to City Hall at the next Transportation Committee meeting and I said, why do we have some bus stops that don't have seating? They're like, oh, it's always been that way. And that's okay? And they're like, well, the Commission on Aging recommended in 2012 that we do something about it. I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, the seniors, they asked a long time ago, but we've never done anything about it. Okay. So I went onto Twitter, and the pieces you see down there, there's a thread that you don't see all of. And I was like, has anybody quick built bus seating for a whole town? And many of you and other great planning and transportation people joined into the conversation, and I got a lot of great ideas. And I went to the Transportation Committee, and I just said to staff, I said, here's 5 choices. Come back in 2 months and tell me which one is the right one, please. What's the budget? How many are missing? Do an audit. How many bus seats are missing? And tell me. They're like, do you want to do a study? I'm like, nope. Don't need to study. Butts and benches makes people happy. It's like old people, young people, children, people with bags, people who are just freaking tired. I was like, don't need to study that butts go in benches. Been doing it for decades. They're like, okay. So they come back and they're like, well, yeah, this one option that this one guy on Twitter gave you, the semi seat, it's good. It's pretty affordable. We could actually amend our paving contract, we think, and we could put all of the missing bus seats in around the city in October, 6 months from now. It's like, cool, get me a contract. So we did it. And I have pictures of all these new seats we installed all over the city, right? My favorite thing for the next few weeks was walking my dogs and just seeing people sitting in them. Seriously, it was like the most empowering thing I think I've had in the city council, was just seeing people sit in a bus seat at a bench. And I told the staff all along, because they were kind of like, you're not going to study it, you want us to change the whole contract. I was like, I will communicate this to the community in a way that you will also appreciate. And so we pumped out Emeryville Public Works. This is one of the first times we did this. Emeryville Public Works delivered this whole thing in 6 months. Thousands of people retweeted this. The city of Emeryville staff started getting calls from planning directors in all the neighboring cities. How did you do this? Why did you do this? Who did this? People got thank you notes at City Hall for it. The Commission on Aging thanked them. And then I had a meeting with them, and I was like, see how happy people are when we just do the business of people. When you just do the things people want every day. They don't want us to solve all the world's problems in local government. They want us to make their lives happy, joyful, comfortable, easy. They want to live in a safe and livable space, right? So I pump up the Public Works Department, and told them, I was like, you should take 5% of your time every week and save it for things that you don't expect to do that people need. That's a practice we have now. Lady calls, the light pole got hit by a tree branch, and now it shines straight into my house window. We just go out the same day and fix it. She writes a letter. You guys are the best, this is the best public works department in the world. It engenders all this goodwill, so that when I go back out to communicate about all these other projects, I'm like, hey, your public works team has a new idea. They love the public works department. Name a city where you know that the people love the public works department. Emeryville, California. Right? And so it actually changed the culture in our public works department. They started seeing and receiving all of this positive feedback. And I have to share as my last two examples, 2 conversations I've had in the last year. One of them, the public works director calls me, Mohammed, I love him. He's like, Mayor, I'm sorry. I was like, for what? He's like, well, we had a couple $100,000 left over from the railroad crossing improvement, the pavement portion of it. I said, it sounds like a bad problem, right? And he's like, well, we're amending the street contract on Shelmont Street, and we're putting in several blocks of concrete separated bike lanes there. It's like, I'm still waiting for the problem. He's like, we didn't tell the bike committee we were gonna do it. I was like, I still don't understand the problem. He's like, well, I know you always want us to go and listen to the bike community. He's like, but I have to sign this contract today, and the bike committee is tomorrow. I was like, how about you go tomorrow, show them the signed contract, and tell them we heard that you wanted more bike lanes, and so we just did this. So he did. And we got a letter from the bike committee saying 12 years ago we couldn't get a meeting with the public works director. Now you have a public works director that gives us bike lanes without asking for them. What have you done? You can change the culture of a community when you change the way people see and feel, and you celebrate them, right? And so this bus thing, I kind of got teased at an event about a year ago about having accomplished this, and there's neighboring cities that are trying to replicate this in our county. And somebody said, well, what can you possibly do next? And I thought about it. I was like, what a good challenge, what a good question. So this year, in our street repaving program, every intersection in Emeryville will have a public bike rack. We audited the entire city, and every intersection will have public parking for biking by the end of the year. And we shared that with people. We hold ourselves accountable. We share that with people. That is what we're doing. We're partnering with Bike East Bay, a local nonprofit who audited it for us, and we are installing bike racks at every intersection in our city. So wherever you go in our town, you can bring in a bike. And it has totally changed the culture. So now people who thought of us as like a little shopping center town or the IKEA on the East Bay, like have a different view. People in our town actually view us as like, yeah, we're the city that does all the cool bike stuff. We're this, like people have a different mindset, right? And they're now the communicators. We don't get lots of people coming and yelling because now the expectation is like we can just do these things. We don't have to have this really fraught process. We can just do these things. So my hope for you is to not feel defeated that these feel far away from you, because Emeryville, California was a car sewer, carpocalyptic town with a lot of regional surface parking and shopping center stuff going on in it. And new leadership came, new ideas came, communication styles changed, and there was real synergy, right? I really heard in the Q&A about the challenge with elected officials and like, oh my God, if I could steal Ryan and Barca, like, and put them on my staff, like Emeryville on steroids, like but there are people in communities, including you, like you can be that person. You may need other people to help you, but you can be that person. But it begins with effectively communicating what you're doing, why you're doing, how you're doing it, and telling it in a way that compels people to feel differently about what's possible. So thank you for inviting me to North Carolina. I've had a good time. And if I have time for questions, I may not. I'll take them.
We're good.
We're good. All right, I'll take a question.
All right. So I'm sure we have quite a few questions for John. So I'm going to make a deal with you. We had a 15-minute break slated for this time spot. But if you're willing to, we can cut that break down to about 5 minutes and just make it a quick coffee restroom break, and that'll leave us 10 minutes for questions here. So if you've got some questions, raise your hands. All right.
They want their coffee. Hi, Barry.
Hi, John. Just wanted to ask about the fear and the feelings and facts part of your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
How do you navigate legitimate fear, particularly from those people of color who have not always been on the best side of these investments as far as infrastructure? How do you navigate their legitimate fear versus, the NIMBY fear that we're all accustomed to?
Fantastic question, Barry. Very important question that didn't make it into this presentation, but I will take the advantage of answering. So you can't ignore very legitimate things. Part of active listening isn't like I'm here to just hear you out, but then your comments don't matter. There are a lot of people for whom their feelings are based in well-rooted histories of displacement, of, in Oakland, for example, paving entire black communities with freeways, bulldozing Chinatown districts to put in stroads, right? We created all the deaths and injuries that are disproportionately black and brown people in Alameda County's example, right? Are the product of 1950s and 60s transportation engineering and land use choices that just decided that these people were pass-through communities and it wasn't to serve them. So today, we run a risk. We think, well, bikes are safe, right? So if I'm putting it in a community that's black or brown, I'm not doing that freeway thing and that stroad thing, right? But that is a very, very foolish assumption. Because you can make the same mistakes for just a different outcome. Like, this road isn't for me. This bike lane is not for me. You are building it for someone else. You didn't consult us. And it's less about the safety infrastructure, and it is more about the process. So in our case, right, we had that same situation. So in 2021, when I became the chair, I'm the longest serving chair now at the Alameda County Transportation Commission. When I became chair, the very first action I took with all 14 cities and the 5 supervisors and the 2 transit agencies was I said, we're going to do something that very few transportation agencies do. We're going to do a race and equity action plan. And we undertook a year-long process in partnership with our staff, our communities, and we came away with 43 strategic steps. Everything from how we procure goods and materials, the contracts, our hiring practices, how we dispense discretionary funding. We're a self-help county. We have about $450 million of funds every year that we give out to our communities in grants. But how are we going to do that justly and with a mindset of we aren't going to repeat what the people who did this in the 1950s and 60s did? And so that came away with strategies that included how do we go to you to invite you to share what your vision for the community is. So we're not showing up and saying, hey, I want to build this today, right? So how do we go to those sensitive communities and do that? And then fulfilling the vision of that plan. So the strategies and action steps. So when you do hear feelings, which I would actually say are also facts, right? Those are facts. Their fear is based on a fact, right? You have to come back with facts that reflect how we're going to care for that feeling. So in our case, we're one of the first counties I'm aware of in California that has a race and equity action plan, one of the only transit agencies in the country that does that. But when we did that, we now go out to the community. We go to West Oakland. We have entire stakeholder groups. We talk to them and we notice them and we invite them in the ways they've asked to be invited, right? So that we're not saying, well, we posted this on the website. They didn't read the website. We door knocked. That's what they wanted. We called them. That's what they wanted, right? We provided the information they wanted. And so we build, actually, doing it that way takes a lot more time and resources and is more intensive. But it also engenders that goodwill. That communication is a love language because they've never received that. And they're more willing and understanding to learn about something that they don't know, feel perhaps less threatened by that, feel that it could be done in a way that better suits what their community's specific needs are, and we could still make progress. So it is, in live time, and this is the practice of active listening and the art of it, sometimes it's not like the example I gave where it's in a meeting about a project, right, where you're dealing with somebody who is more predictably inflammatory versus somebody who has a legitimate concern, and understanding and hearing that and committing to the action steps that are required to actually ensure that we do protect against that fear. So the answer varies, right? It can be in a meeting, and it can also be, we're going to take that back and work on that. And we do that hard work where we are too, and I'm very proud of that work.
Hey.
Hey.
I wanted to ask, how do you feel like your position as a mayor and or a council member empowers you to do the work that you do differently or more effectively than you would be able to do in a different position within the government? Or on the flip side, that do you think you would be able or would have been able to accomplish what you have if you were, say, a member of the city planning department or engineering department?
Yeah, good question. I think it does. There is a difference. It would be ignorant of me to say otherwise. So what most people don't know is I have a full-time job that's not this. This is my moonlighting job. My full-time job, I'm actually the advocacy director. I represent sexual assault and domestic violence victims, and I lobby legislators and decision makers to remove barriers to access to healthcare services and trauma recovery programs, and to move healthcare funding into communities that need it the most. So I do the advocacy thing full-time, right? So I usually sit in the audience in the public meeting, and then I get to moonlight sitting at the decision-making chair, and I have the duality of both perspectives, and it informs a lot about how I do advocacy too. Because once I got elected, it changed my perspective of, the people on the back in the staff room, right, who have kind of questions and issues and challenges, who are maybe like, Mayor, we can't do that, we can't do that. And I had to learn how to build a culture inside the organization of, we can, be proud, defend our town. People were afraid to push back on that. I was like, no, defend our town against the utility company that wants to cut all the street trees down. Those are our trees, right? And so I do think there is a difference. In terms of the respective influence of it being in a bureaucracy or as an advocate versus as the mayor, you do, as the elected official, hold an additional level of authority. And it's not just the decision-making authority, it's kind of this deferential assumption many people have that, like, he's the top. Like, he can make the final decisions. It doesn't mean all the decisions go my way, right? But when you've built a culture around your leadership style, which is what I'm mostly known for, it's like people always say, they're like, you never ran on bike lanes. I ran on making communities livable. That was my entire campaign. It was like, we deserve to live in a place that's lovely and joyful. But I think when you have the position or the authority of being an elected official, you do have some extra persuasion. And I will just give by way of example, at the commission that I'm on, the year before I was elected the chair, 6 months before I was elected chair, there was a proposal to widen State Route 84 and add new interchange at Interstate 880 to bulldoze a family farm, remove 140 some old growth oak trees. And the commission voted 21-1 to do it. And I told everybody there's never been proof that widening a freeway actually relieves congestion, so I don't believe we can eminently domain this property. Okay? Sometimes you can still be in the minority in an elected position and still lead. And I think that's true for bureaucrats. I think that's true for staff. I think that's true for people in all the other spaces. You might be the staff person in the planning department and not the planning director. But in that staff meeting, you can still speak your truth. You can still present your ideas, right? And maybe the staff director isn't agreeing with you that day, but maybe your colleagues are. And maybe that person is retiring soon. And maybe your colleagues are going to the city manager and going, you know what? Barca, she should be the director. Because people see leadership for what it is. It may not be in a moment, but over time, people will really trust people who consistently message with leadership. And so I do think I have additional authority that others don't have. But I also think people in my position use it poorly or don't use it at all. And so sometimes in relation to staff, in some cities, the staff run everything because the mayor doesn't really care or doesn't want to lead. Hi.
I'm Lori Bush. I'm also an elected.
Oh, thanks for joining us.
And I'm curious, you've given us a lot of examples of successes that you've had.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if you're willing to share one of your failures and what you learned from that or what you might have done differently.
On transportation in particular?
In particular, but
Sure.
yeah.
A failure I've had. I've had a couple times where I've wanted to get a higher level of infrastructure treatment. So I can think of a couple projects where the best I got were those like Q bollard sticks, right, out of it. But that was because community members, you know, they pushed. I was willing to do the full treatment, the concrete separated kind of approach, but I had other people on my council who were concerned because they were neighbors or they had some other relationship. And in those cases, I was frustrated. These were earlier in my career. I have not recorded a loss, so to speak, in a while, but I think the path to victory is paved with learning from failure. And in those cases, I could have very easily been upset or said whatever, or we're doing this wrong or whatever. I just factually go on record about why I would have done it my way. And I cast the vote. It's just like the cutting the trees down and the farm down to, you know, build a highway. I just told everybody, I was like, we have to make a finding of necessity. Necessity requires a showing that without it, we can't do it, and you can't relieve congestion. There's no reports that have ever shown that. So I can't make this finding. It's a legal requirement, and I won't be able to vote for this today. And the person who sponsored the project, I had called him the day before to tell him I would be doing that. And he actually said, he's like, Mr. Bauters has values that I really deeply appreciate. He lives his values every day, and I wish more elected people were like him. He and I disagree about this project, but I respect that he's a values-driven person. And so everybody else here, I still expect you to vote for my project. Because you didn't take the time to call me like you did and explain those values to me, right? And what I learned, what I earned from those types of things was the long-term respect, so that when things were closer or it was an opportunity for me to actually get the win all the way, people were willing to vote with me. And probably the most consistent feedback I get from other mayors is they're like, you're very much values-driven, and I respect that. And so I lost a lot upholding my values, but I'd never turned my back on partnership. You know, I came out as a gay kid a long time ago in the 90s, and my family didn't receive that well, and I had to leave home. But 30 years later, I have an amazing relationship with my family, and what I tell people is if you leave your heart open for people to change and be better and learn, it's great when that happens. The magic of that can be really amazing, right? So sometimes it feels like we're losing, but I always feel like I'm just in the first inning of a longer game, maybe. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Again, this is great. I'd love to get one more question in. So if you need to take a quick break and go fill up coffee, go and do that now. But I'm still going to have one more question, and then we're going to roll straight into our next session.
Great.
Thank you.
Hey, Mayor.
Hey.
Just, want to say, while you're so obviously trying to poach the best and the brightest from New Jersey, the city of Asheville would like to poach you as mayor if you'd have us. It's a beautiful city. But that's not my question. You mentioned YouTube and the company formerly known as Twitter, and I wonder how you have been successful at applying alternative media to your messaging, and specifically how you bring that fact versus feeling and active listening into a one-way communication digitally to reach more people than are just the ones in a room like this.
Yeah, great question. So how do I use social media? So full disclosure, I never had Facebook or Instagram or any of these things, and I had to get a Twitter account a number of years ago for work. I was going to be denied meeting Michelle Obama, which was like destructive for me. Totally was going to destroy me, but my boss said, it's because you don't have a communication style on social anywhere. I didn't want social, and we need to have something so that people can see all the work you do in my full-time job. And so when I got elected, my campaign team was like, you got to have some social media presence. So I started using, I had like 12 followers, seriously. And then I posted one day, stop complaining about bicyclists being on the road. If you complain anymore, I'll take out parking spaces. And I got 25,000 retweets or whatever, and then everybody knew who I was. They were like, this is actually not a parody account, it's a real mayor. And I kind of tripped into Twitter stardom in a way, but I'll tell you what my message is, right? How do I use it effectively? I'm always 100% authentically myself. 100%, and my love language is joy. And so you go onto Twitter and people stop me all over the country. They're like, I loved this video you posted of this, or like the video of you and your dog in the cargo bike was just like, and talking about this, like it just clicked for me. And so I have just learned that people, I don't think anything I say is genius. I don't think I invented any of these ideas. Like, that's not how it is. I think I just so authentically communicate how I feel. I'm so accessible to people, and I live with joy. I think that people want to be part of things that are joyful. People want to be part of things that are successful. They like to see change. They don't know how to get it, but when they see other people get it, they want to follow that. And so I think for me, my success is largely just due to truly just being who I am and not watering that down or politicizing that in a way. Most of his tweets are about housing and bikes. Sure, because that's what I like to talk about. Like, I don't need to be like doing all the things that people want to tell you to do as a politician. That's what I want to talk about. And so people see that joy, they see that that's what I care about, and so people are attracted to that, I think. And that's what I think is effective.